Scary story number 11, title, Uber driver. Story begins. I ordered an Uber back to my home from a party my friend hosted. The party I went to had beer, girls, and awful music. So basically your average college party. I just walked as far as I could until I couldn't hear the music coming from the house, and I sat on a curb waiting for my driver to arrive. My driver was about 8 minutes away from me. I sat there on the curb, scrolling through my phone to kill time, occasionally checking the little car icon on the Uber app. A few minutes passed, and the headlights of passing cars made me squint, hoping each one was mine. None of them were. Finally, the car pulled up, and the app pinged, "Your driver has arrived." It wasn't what I was expecting. The car was an old, beat-up sedan, and it looked like it hadn't been cleaned since the day it rolled off the lot. But the license plate matched with what the app said, so I told myself it was fine. So there was something about it, a gut feeling I couldn't shake. I opened the door and saw a middle-aged man, possibly in his late 30s to early 40s. He looked Asian, his face lined with deep creases that made him seem older than he probably was. He wore a dark brown leather jacket that was cracked and worn. His black hair was streaked with strands of gray that fell in rows, with a slick-back, shiny hairstyle from all the product he put in. He wore glasses with rectangular frames that didn't quite suit his face. They sat slightly crooked, magnifying his small, darting eyes. "Are you Phil?" I asked the driver as I hesitated by the open door. "That's me, my friend. Get in and we'll be off," replying with a smile that threw me off guard. Then I slid into the back seat. I was taken away by his demeanor because he was a prime example of not judging a book by its cover. The car reeked of stale cigarettes, like he chain-smoked 4 packs just to pass the time before picking me up. "Sorry about the smell," Phil said, laughing as he adjusted the rearview mirror. "I know it's a bad habit, but it makes me sane on long drives, you know." "Sure, I get it," I replied. "Where are we headed tonight?" Phil asked, glancing at me in the mirror. His eyes were magnified behind his glasses, catching the reflection of the dim streetlights outside. "Just heading home," I replied, pulling up my address on the app to show him. "Gotcha," he said. "I know this area pretty well. You look like you had a fun night. Was it a party? What's the scene like now? Still kegs and bad music?" His friendliness was hard to pin down. It wasn't creepy exactly, but it was persistent, like he couldn't let the silence settle for more than a few seconds. The car jolted forward as he pulled away from the curb, and I tried to settle into the back seat, despite the smell and the cracked leather sticking to my jacket. Phil hummed to himself as we cruised through the quiet streets, occasionally muttering something under his breath that I couldn't quite catch. At first, everything seemed fine. The familiar streets passed by, and I let myself relax a little. But then I noticed something. We missed a turn. "I think you're supposed to turn left back there," I said, sitting up straighter. Phil laughed, a deep, throaty sound that made me uneasy. "Don't worry about it, buddy. I know a shortcut. Saves time." I glanced down at my phone. The map showed a straightforward route, but Phil was going off course. I asked him if he was sure this was faster as I showed him my phone, and he told me that the apps never account for traffic patterns, construction, etc. He kept convincing me that this route was better. However, it still didn't put my mind at ease. The app was still open, showing my destination getting farther away. I kept telling Phil that this isn't the right way, but more firmer this time. He didn't respond at first. Finally, he chuckled, low and unsettling. "You ever think about how much trust people put in strangers?" he said, almost to himself. "You get in a car and you just assume the driver's going to take you where you want to go, never even thinking about what might happen if they didn't." He said this as he was pulling up to a gravel road with only trees surrounding the area. He stopped the car as I asked him, "Why are we stopping?" There was no response this time as he got out of the car and went to the trunk. Now I was shaking. I could feel my chest getting tighter. He pulled out a sledgehammer from the trunk, and then he opened the door. Without warning, he lunged, gripping my ankle with one hand and pulling me toward him. I kept kicking his hand, but he wouldn't budge. I was out of the car on the ground with a sledgehammer over his head, about to bash my skull in. I kicked him off balance and drove off in his car since he left the car running as he chased me until he couldn't catch up. I used my phone to get back to a familiar place, and I reported this incident to the police station. The next day, the police station called to tell me that Phil was found in the location that I told them to look for. Phil was charged with kidnapping and aggravated assault. He will serve 20 to 30 years in prison. Every time I see an Uber notification pop up on my phone, I can't help but feel the weight of Phil's words. You ever think about how much trust people put in strangers? Story ends.